Welcome back to the Shuffle Squad. I'm joined here by tier list extraordinaire Dom Ritchie. What's poppin', Dom?
Not much. I appreciate you having me back on the channel. I used to do these every week, but we're here because Zach needed my help because nobody does a tier list as good as I do.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't even know how to do a tier list. Dom is the master. We're gonna figure it out. Toronto Regionals just happened. Dom and I both played. I might have done slightly better than Dom. Let's not ask him about it. But if you are looking for anything, check out the description for links for Dom, links for myself, so you can kind of get it up and going on whatever we're doing, coaching, social media, all that stuff. But I do want to dive into this tier list. Toronto is pretty interesting. And I mean, does it go in alphabetical order if I'm looking at this, all these different cards?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess we're going to start in alphabetical order. Our Chaladon. I mean, I felt like I was at the top tables all day, and I didn't see much Archaladon. Did you see any, Dom?
So actually, the best to hold, I can't even hold up. Wait, the best placing Archaladon, I don't even know if it was in 128. It got 80th. 80th was the best placing Archaladon.
That's not bad. That's not bad. I mean, I like the deck. I like Dura. Dura can evolve.
Yeah, I mean, Archaladon's cool. The ability to use Dialga is really neat. That being said, the top two placing lists, which got 80th and 98th respectively, did not play Dialga. I think Archaladon's pretty good though. It's a turn your brain off, attack. You don't have a weakness and just try to tank hits. I think it's a neat deck. I don't think it's very good. Like probably B or C.
Like, yeah, I feel like if we had like a B- tier, that's where I'd want to put it.
Yeah.
It's actually one of the decks that does like oddly okay against Reggie Drago, like in my testing. But I think like I don't want to put it B because like I think we're gonna reserve a lot of things for B because I think S and A are really gonna be reserved for some top decks. And like I just feel like this is under that line of B. So I mean, if you're an Archaladon lover, I'm sorry. I think we gotta put it C this week. And if you're looking for deck lists for all of these, I think we've covered most of the decks on our channel, so watch through some of our previous videos. Our top 10 best decks might feature Archaladon from time to time, maybe not anytime soon, but we've covered it on there, so check them out. Banette. I feel like Banette also wasn't anywhere at Toronto Regionals. I feel like this deck kind of had a falling off period.
Banette, it had one deck in day 2, which was just top 64. I do want to say though is that Banette, I feel like just didn't have the play that it has seen, which does account for it, but like top 64 is not that good. Banette, I just think is not in that great of a position.
I think 64 is actually so good. Not saying just because I went 64 at the regionals.
Yeah, I mean, like 64 is okay,
just to put that
it's
out
not
there,
like the top 8.
It's 9-3-1. Like someone won like almost 70% of their games. Like I think those are win rates that are just like, I don't know. I'm not here to hype up Banette. I think Banette has to probably go in the same tier as Archaladon because like I think B tier is like we could only probably reserve that for decks that did like 32 or higher or had a large meta share presence. So I think it's probably like C tier, or we have to have some kind of reason for it. I don't know if does Banette beat Drago anymore? I don't even know about that.
I don't even think so. I think Drago just being fast enough to just try Frost early is bad for Banette. I think Banette's just in a bad spot, and I think Serledge is kind of in that same position where like I just don't know if it's quite fast enough, and I think its Reggie Drago matchup can be pretty terrible.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the type of deck that like if you get set up turn 2, you're good, and you might just like sun run one of these like Drago decks. But like unfortunately, like if you look at the results of Toronto, and if we look at the results of LAIC in a handful of these tournaments pretty recently, Drago's just it. Drago is the best deck defined in format. So if your deck doesn't have a fantastic matchup or is severely underplayed for reasons that it doesn't do well against the other decks, that's why it's probably gonna end up in C tier. B tier might have a little bit more things going for it. A tier is pretty close to S, but not quite the best. And then D tier is kind of just like, this deck is not super competitively viable right now because of reasons that are worse, like could be. Okay, Lost on Boxes, I think that's what's interesting. Like, it's not A tier for sure. And I mean,
Lost on Yeah.
It's not S tier. I'll put it like that. I mean, this deck I feel
Lost Zone
folds.
Box's best placement was top 128.
Yeah, I think Lost Zone Box, it's like either like high B tier, or sorry, low B tier or high C tier. Like, again, we need that like in between, like if there was like a B minus. But I think Lost Zone Box, I mean, I'm gonna tentatively put it at B right now. I might change my minds. I think it's better than the rest of these decks just because it's proved itself. We saw like Michael Davidson, one of the top players in the game, take it to a second place finish at Louisville. In all of our formats, basically, like Twilight Masqueron kind of blend together into this super format of Drago is the best deck in format, and the rest of the decks kind of take turns trying to beat it or not. Gholdengo, I don't know if like...
Yeah, Gholdengo is kind of booty. Like, if we look at... Okay, so Gholdengo went from 3rd place in play rate to 10th place in day 2, and its best place was 2 top 64s.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like...
conversion rate is horrible.
Yeah, I mean, but it's also, like, I feel like the deck also attracts, like, a lot of people. Like, it has kind of the same thing as Ceruledge or Archaludon, where people just think that it's a super easy deck to play. I think those who were experienced with the deck saw like those deeper runs. Like, again, when we look at like a top 64 at the tournament, I'm probably like, I mean, I came 51st place. If one of my losses turned into a tie, I think I could have got 32.
32.
And I think like if one of my losses was a win, I think I'd be locked for 32 or maybe 16. Like, so like we're pretty close to just like seeing these runs where it comes like the margin for like making it there is literally a tie or a loss, and that's how it's going to go down each level. So I don't know, I think the deck is like, it to me it seems like it's B tier.
Yeah,
it's competitively viable, it's there, but we'll see.
I think it's yeah.
Miraidon, I think is like more or less the same. It had that deep double run in Sacramento, but like I feel like the deck kind of fell off. How did it do at Toronto overall?
It had the worst conversion rate of any deck. 2 in day 2 and no top 64s.
Yeah.
It had less day 2 appearances than Archaludon.
Well, I think the thing that like harms it, where it's just like it has a bad matchup to everything for the most part. Like even the other aggro decks that like try to like that are like in the same category, like Roaring Moon or Raging Bull, like they both have like fighting single prize card attackers. So yeah. Like I think the Dawn was like really cool, and it seemed like really decently positioned in a world where people were playing like Lugia and stuff like that. Cut that out, and you cling away from one of your like only good matchups that's played in abundance. So Miraidon did a good thing clearing like Lugia for like the past few tournaments, but now it's just like, yeah, Miraidon's just like kind of in the, it's all right. I think you could see some success with it. And I mean, look, if you have any of these decks at home, all the power to you. I think it's always cool to kind of experiment with things. Like even for me, like I won a cup with Gouging Fire. I won a league challenge, I think, with Lost Zone Goodra earlier this season. Like you could play these decks. You might just find yourself in a position where it's not where we want it to be, competitive wise.
Yeah.
Guardy, I think we're gonna see our first A tier deck.
Yeah.
The players 100%. That played it are some of the best players in the game. Henry Chow, absolutely fantastic player, our Baltimore regional champion. Our fellow teammate Josh Frink, Benny Billinger, Michael Davidson. The list goes on and on and on. You don't get players that are playing a deck like that when it doesn't do well. It's not well positioned, and I think a lot of them say that the Gardevoir should beat Drago now. Apparently, according to them.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That matchup seems bad.
To me, it seems bad, but these are like the Gardevoir. They're the Gardevoir brain children,
I
right?
Know.
So
I know, and they were cutting candy. I don't know. I was never thinking to cut candy, but they're like, yeah, I'm cutting candy. I'm playing Clef.
I don't even know if they play like Manaphy anymore. I'm just like, don't they just get Kyurem board wiped? Because that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm playing Drago. I'm wiping out their board. But you want to know what? To shamelessly plug our friends. check out the Josh Frank Henry Chow Metafy Masterclass on Gardevoir, because they might have some like reasoning that Dom and I don't understand here. I haven't watched it yet, but I've only heard good things. Now, I told Dom when it came to setting up this tier list, only put decks that made day 2 in Toronto. So I don't know if Dom's meaning, did Tina make day 2 in Toronto?
Giratina, Lost Zone Giratina did in fact make day 2 at Toronto Regionals.
Like 2 years ago?
No, this year, 134th place.
Who are they?
It was Brooke English. I actually saw their post on Twitter, and they're like, "Yeah, my first day 2 with Giratina," and I was like,
"Okay,
well, that's interesting." It's like, yeah,
I don't know. I feel like it's got to be like, I feel like it's worsely
throw that in
positioned.
D tier. Throw it in D tier.
I don't know if it's. Oh, yeah.
You want to what? This deck is bad.
Like, okay, like I think like it's not bad because they made day 2, but like I did go through like so recently. Look, I'll go over here. I have these awesome Omni Hives by Ultimate Guard. Shameless plug.
Yeah.
I fill out each one. The top 20 decks all are in a sidewinder. So I have 3 of these. And then the bottom one, I have 14 folders that are 60 plus sides. And I have 14 decks in this one that we have here. So if anyone's doing the math, it's the top 34 decks in format. Reggies Drago, number 1 deck in format. Lost Zone Tina, not in the top 34 decks. So I think unless we're seeing something, so maybe before we just toss Tina in D tier, let's just talk about some bigger decks. It probably does all right against Snorlax. That's cool. Maybe it can hold its own against Cloth. Its Lugia matchup's always been debated. It sometimes, I feel like it usually loses against the turbo aggro decks, like Miraidon and all those kind of things. And I feel like its Reggidrago match is pretty bad. So yeah, I think I'm gonna tentatively, like, I'd put it in C- if there was one. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily D tier because it made like whatever here, but like, I don't know. I think it's just one of those decks where they maybe had a really dedicated pilot that got there. I mean, there's that case of the player that played what's the deck? Swim Freely. And they played it at
I saw that.
they played it at a League Cup out here in Quebec. And I think Pokeduels got them to write an article, and they played it to Toronto Regionals. And if they made day 2, I'd still probably put that deck in D tier, because every deck has a place in the format. So we can go on and on and on about that, but I just figured like for Lost Zone Tina, we'd slow it down. We have Hydreigon. I think Hydreigon is probably a C tier deck off the top. We had players like Tord Reklev, Jesper Eriksson, a lot of big named players from Europe played this deck, and I don't think they did particularly great in the tournament. But someone had to make day 2. Anyone notable make the day 2 that we know of, Dom?
I am about to butcher this name a lot. Yihausha Tate. They've got they top 8'd Peoria last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah, Yoshi Tate is they're a pretty big rogue deck player. I've been playing the game for years.
I'm looking here. Here's Kiram Palkia, Aerodactyl Caracosta, Wishy Washy.
Yeah, they typically bring something odd. I think like Hydreigon is to me a cool deck. But I think we're gonna hard drop it in the C tier, because it's just hasn't really proven itself more than that. Cloth to me, I think, is probably B tier deck. I don't think I had a great conversion rate at this tournament.
No, not really. Cloth, 11 people in day 2. It was not a horrible conversion rate at all, but it didn't convert the way he thought it was going to. We didn't see it in top 8. Most of the people that made day 2 ended up outside of top 128.
Yeah, so I think it's a good deck to get you into day 2, but I think a lot of the top players have learned how to play against it. Decks like Charizard, Reggidrago. I mean, there just seems like there's a handful of decks that don't want to lose to Cloth anymore. Snorlax, I'm actually gonna say A tier. What do you think?
Snorlax was incredible. It went from a 2% deck in day 1 to 7% in day 2 with 15 people appearing in day 2. So that conversion rate's insane.
Yep. So, I mean, Snorlax, I really like the list that Cyrus Davis and I think Dennis Prof played. I think they came top 32 and top 64 respectively, with the double clef key to lock out Petra and EX that is being played in cloth decks and ancient box decks. So I don't know. There's some cool things going on with that list. Totally check it out. Lugia. Now, Lugia is tough because I think Lugia is probably an A tier deck, but the play that it sees nowadays puts it in B tier. But with Miraidon in B tier and the way that the metagame is transpiring for all the Dragos, I think we got to put our legendary bird up here in A tier.
Yeah, Lugia went from not on the graphic at all, like not even a top 12 deck, to number 4.
Yeah.
14 decks in day 2. Like that's a very good. That's a good conversion rate, and obviously we did see it lose in asymmetrical cut. We saw Kieran go down, unfortunately, getting at 9th place. So it did do better than majority of decks. 2 appearances in the top 32. One is just Bubble at 34. Several top 64s. The deck did very well. I think it's actually pretty well positioned. I think people were just afraid because of Miraidon.
Yeah, and I think that's like, I think even in my top 10 decks the previous week, so if you haven't got a chance to check those out, I do them every Friday. I think I had Lugia like within the top 5 or the top 4, just being like, Miraidon's probably on its way down, and I think the players who are playing it just aren't going to like see the success that it saw in Sacramento. Because I mean, there's a lot of cloth around, there's a lot of ancient box. I mean, if you look at this list, there's a lot of like Miraidon counters up in that metagame. So Lugia might just be okay to like break it out again. I mean, look at Kieran's season. It's been crazy good. Big
Kieran,
Moon.
Rahul, like...
Yeah, exactly. Some of the best names in the game are playing the deck. I think Big Moon is probably B tier. It's just not quite on this level of A, because I don't think it's going to get those like really top note placements. Like any aggro deck, you could find like one sneak into the top 8 or like one sneak into the top 16. But I think it really like falls off, and a lot of it's like, it's those players that had those like aggressive starts, the Professor Sada's Vitality, the Dark Patches, the Prime Catcher rip off the Pokestop. Not a bad deck. I mean, I think B tier is really just like, these are like decks in the top 10, top 20. And I think anyone could play them and they could win a tournament. But at the same time, like they're pretty like well balanced enough where they're just like kind of like the definition of a Pokemon deck.
Yeah, I mean, I played this deck, and I mean, Pokestop's still a fake card. I said I'd play Professor Sada, and Raging Bolt seemed to not be good for the event. And I was like, I'm going to play Roaring Moon. And the deck just... It's a cool deck. I like Roaring Moon, but the Drago matchup might seem favored until they, like, can go second and donk you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just, like, it's a cool deck, but if you're a turbo deck, probably you want to beat Regidrago.
Or if you go like 200 damage on yourself, right? And then they're like, yep, cool, Prime Catcher, 4 prize cards. And then you're like, cool, how do I win? We're going to move on to Ancient Box. I think Ancient Box, to me, I played this deck. This is the deck that I came top 64 with. I think it's like, again, it's another one of these B tier decks. It's not perfect, but it does have pretty much favorable matchups into the rest of the B tier and into the rest of A tier. Really, like, the biggest thing that holding it back is you got to avoid Regidrago a decent bit, which is like probably 25% of the meta. But against the other like 60 to 75% of the metagame, you're probably big chillin'. So I felt in every game that I didn't face an auto loss, I felt like I was the one doing the winning. So
yeah, and you were the highest placing Ancient Box player.
Let's go. That list,
that's always something to look at here.
That list was fire. I mean, only play Ancient Box in the right metagames, because otherwise it's very bad. The deck is, I played enough of it. Greninja. So is this just straight up Greninja?
Okay, hold up. I'll read out the list to you. I want you to tell me if this sounds fire or not. Okay, the list is, okay, 2-1-2 Greninja line, a 2-1-2 Pidge line, a 2-1-1 Dust Noir line, and a 2-0-1 Zard line.
Yeah, I think that the deck is definitely cooked. I mean, you wanna know what? I feel like decks like this are like, I go back to earlier on this season how I had a Charizard, Dust Noir, Dragapult Pidgeot deck that I played at a League Challenge. I think, Dom, you were there.
I played that deck to a cup.
Yeah, and it's just like, it was cool, but like I feel like these 4 stage 2 Pokemon EX decks, sometimes they just come at your opponent and they confuse them a little bit. So it probably like made day 2, but I'm assuming it didn't go very far in day 2.
It got almost last place.
Okay, so I mean a top 256 deck, give or take. I'm gonna put it D tier, just because it's like relatively experimental. Maybe if it starts picking up some steam, it can move up as we do future iterations. Now, Palkia is another one of these decks that I think has kind of fallen down the list. And I think a lot of it when it comes to Palkia, and one of my biggest gripes with Palkia last season, I don't understand how it was a top like 3 most played deck. It loses to Drago. It loses to a lot of the big basic decks. So I know like Ancient Box is a tough matchup. I know that sometimes decks like Lost Zone Box, especially having some lightning type Pokemon, make it a tough matchup. It loses to Raging Bolt. I don't think it's D tier, and I think both the Palkia Noctowl and the Palkia Dusknoir variant are probably just C tier decks right now.
Yeah, I would like to say though, is both the Palkia Dusknoir variants ended in the top 64, and all except one of the Palkia Noctowl variants whiffed top 128. So I think Palkia Dusknoir is probably just a way to play the deck.
Sure.
So I'm just weighing in on that. I think Palkia Dusknoir is optimal.
Gotcha. And if anyone's trying to get updated lists for all this stuff, I do have my own personal Metafy group that I will be putting in the link below. So if you want to get access to any of my deck lists, probably like for the top 40-50 decks, I do have deck lists for all these. Pidgeot Control, I think it's like one of those decks that just doesn't get played enough, but I actually think it's an A tier deck.
Oh, for sure.
We see like a lot of the big brain players playing it, and I just like mean like the players they just like kind of learn how to play Pidgeot correctly into all the big matchups, and then you see them like, you're like, Pidgeot Control, no one plays it, and it makes a top 8 or a top 4 or a top 16. Like they always run deep, and it's very few players playing the deck, so that's where I kind of want to put that deck. Pult was nowhere.
Paul was interesting in the sense that like Pult Thorns dominated in
I guess there's Pult Thorns. Yeah, I forgot about like.
Yeah, it dominated day 1 and absolutely fell off in day 2. But it did get 104th, 105th, and 106th. So that's pretty
the consistency
interesting.
is uncanny. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think Pult Thorns is one of those things where like it's good if you don't know how to play against it, but the second your opponent knows how to beat Pult Thorns, your deck's probably just bad.
Like players in day 2 at the top tables probably beat it, but I am gonna put it B tier. I think like it's just it's a well-rounded deck. Speaking about B tier decks, I think Raging Bolt is probably just gonna be tossed in that mix there too. I think it just kind of holds its own. Again, like these hyper aggressive decks just seem like decently well positioned in the metagame, but like there's always something that has coming for them. Now we're gonna get to the Reggies. I the first time I saw it, I think was like when Surging Sparks was legal. I think Charlie Lockyer played it. I thought it was interesting. I saw a couple around me in day 2. I think it's just like not super played a lot.
No. Yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of people playing it in day 1. I think I saw like at least 20 people playing it day 1. One of them made day 2. They did not win a game in day 2, but I still think that the merit of making day 2 with a deck like Reggies is cool. I watched it function a little bit. I watched them like turn 1 go Radiant Greninja. I also saw turn 1 Pikachu EX. Like I think there's cool stuff you can do with the deck. But I think when not enough people are playing a deck, it's hard to get that representation. If top players aren't playing a deck, it's not going to do well.
I think right now I'm probably going to end up putting it in D tier.
Probably. It's
like I think it's a C- tier. Like, but like again, like we need these in between tiers to like properly like. Sometimes 5 is like too little to go with. Drago instant S tier.
Yeah, instant S tier.
Like it had 6 out of the top 8 spots in Toronto, both decks in finals. And I just think like the list is really like well discovered. I think like any of the top players list for Regidrago are very close. And I mean, Alolan Executor added a lot to that deck, so I think it's quite good.
Yeah, now I do have a question about that. Is Regidrago here? Regidrago has won, I believe, 5 regionals.
Sure.
And Lugia in its peak 1-7. Do you think Regidrago passes peak Lugia as the most dominant deck ever?
So we also have to factor in that peak Lugia also had more tournaments. So in our structure, we actually have less tournaments now. And I think had we had more tournaments with lesser players, we'd probably see Drago win a little bit more. So like, while I don't think it's as dominant because Lugia was something like a 40% of the metagame, I do think that the deck is more skill-based, which is fantastic. So while it might not necessarily be the most exciting gameplay outside of Cal Connor's coin flip with swinging Sphene in the finals to end the game and slapping the Fez to knock the Teal Mask off the table. Anyways, yeah, it's one of those things where yeah, I think Regidrago is just like better for the game because it adds options. I think it's an incredibly skill heavy deck, and I don't know, there's a lot of stuff. So while people might not necessarily like it, it's S tier. If you don't like it, don't smash that like button. If you do, smash that like button.
Yeah, if you don't like it, yeah, subscribe as well while you're at it.
I think Terapagos to me is definitely a B tier deck.
Yeah, deck's kind of mid, to be honest.
It's like okay because it's like, but it's not great against Regidrago. It can hold its own against Snorlax, it can hold its own against Lugia, it can hold its own against a lot of decks, but I think like it's just not there in A tier yet. It also has like this weird stigma where people don't really play it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like Terapagos seemed like BDIF. What was that? Like in October when we went to like Peru, and you top 16'd Lima SPE with it. It seemed like it was like far and away a very, very good deck. And kind of as the meta's evolved, you've seen less people like steer towards Terapagos, and it's kind of fallen off. I think people are learning to play against it more. I just think it's just in general not the absolute best deck anymore.
I'm also decided that I want to put Lawson at C tier. I thought about it.
That makes sense.
And I was looking at it and I'm like, you want to know what? I think it's like just doesn't hold its own right now with the decks on the top. Like, it's hard to be like when Drago's the #1 deck in the format to put it up there. And it also doesn't hold its own against a lot of the other decks. That being said, it does create space perfectly for Iron Thorns. Which I think is just like another B tier deck. Like it has some answers. It can hold on to Regidrago's matchups. Sometimes I ran into 2 of them at Toronto, surprisingly, but I think like a lot of people are just on that deck right now.
Yeah. Well, we did like a spreadsheet going into the event, and Iron Thorns was like the top 3 decks, like win percentage into the meta share. If it beat the top decks, like if it like took heavy losses to a popular deck, and like Iron Thorns seemed good, but it's also like sometimes you start one lone Iron Thorns, you get donked. You play 4 Pokemon, you give your opponent too many mulligans. It's a cool deck. I like Iron Thorns. The idea of it, I miss Path to the Peak, but I think Iron Thorns, good players can play around it, and I think that's kind of the issue with decks like Iron Thorns.
Sure. No, I 100% feel you there. Blood Moon. I think Blood Moon, I don't know how it made day 2 at Toronto Regionals, but I think it's D tier. This is one of the decks that I won a league challenge with earlier this season, and I love my little baby Blood Moon deck. I literally have it built right now in one of those top 34 decks. But when it comes to top 34 decks, it's a bottom 34 deck, and it might literally, it's like 30th, I think, on my list. So while it can compete with some of the other aggressive decks, it does seem to have a tough time against our current metagame in a lot of ways. People probably just didn't know how to play against it, to be honest. And sometimes the element of surprise can carry you. How did it finish in day 2?
In day 2, it got 172nd place.
Gotcha.
I will say that the guy playing it, Ed Rickard, he did it day 2 with it in Baltimore as well. He's the only person to day 2 with the deck, so that's some commitment. So it might also be he's just so knowledgeable with his matchups that he was just able to pull it off.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's fair. Sometimes you see players that get super dedicated to one deck. And Charizard, I think Charizard's going to be our last A tier deck. I feel like if there's any deck above and there was a deck like in the middle between S-, A+, Charizard would be that deck. I think I saw a lot of top players playing it. holds its own against a lot of the metagame, but still that Charizard matchup's not, or that Charizard into Reggie Drago matchup's not where we want it right now. And that's kind of scary. It does beat all the aggro decks. It does have a solid chance against most other decks, but like any it's A tier, so it's not perfect. I think Drago is legitimately a perfect deck in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, the deck is broken. Drago is like, I don't think I played through Peak Lugia, I played through Palkia and Pidgeot, I played like all that. It's like Reggie Drago, I think, is the deck that I'm most sitting here. Like, this deck is just broken. It's not even like, it's just really good. It's that, like, it literally is, it can do every single thing you want from a deck, and that it's so strong.
Yeah, 100%. So that's kind of the Toronto Day 2 tier list in a nutshell. I think what Dom and I are going to try to do is maybe try to get more of these tier list videos out on a regular basis, because I feel like they're pretty popular on the channel, and Dom's really good at creating tier lists, and I am clueless at creating tier lists. So we are going to use and abuse Dom's knowledge, but if you liked hanging out with all of us, when it comes down to it, check out the links below. You can catch up with Dom and I on social media, on Metafy, and anywhere else where you might find us. If you want to support the squad, give this video a like. Subscribe, double check to see if you subscribed, because I know a lot of y'all think you are subscribed and then you aren't, and that's okay too. I totally do that all the time. And if you want to leave a comment, it does help boost the YouTube algorithm. We will get back to it. So yeah, that's cool. Check out our sponsors too. Other than that, Dom, I'll let you close things out if you have anything else you want to say.
No, I just appreciate you guys having me on. Obviously, it's been a little bit since I've been here. But yeah, catch me on Twitter at TempoPTCG. I post a lot. Most of the time, you'll see me commenting on the metagame or talking about Raging Bolt. But besides that, we have a good time. Zach, I appreciate you. It was nice seeing everybody this weekend. And until next time, guys, I will catch you later.
All right. Well, stay tuned for more great videos to bring you that next TSS win. And we will catch up with all y'all later. Peace out and have a great one. Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.